Scott Rademacher, Red Dirt Cryptids, Bordertown Paranormal, Kansas Sightings. Shaw Wooten, Geeks Paranormal, a Muck podcast exploring the paranormal perspective podcast. Goodness, girl. You're far too busy for us. And Ken Rohrmuller, Monster Paranormal and a Muck podcast. So this is going to be our UFO UAP. And this one is done by our guest moderator, Enzo Cyrille. This is UFO UAP, government involvement with aliens and saucers from Project Sign to Today panel. And Enzo is a retired Air Force veteran specializing in aircraft maintenance and aviation safety, and is an amateur astronomer and paranormal investigator with SEK Bordertown Paranormal. And he's also a podcast personality doing podcasts all the time. He can't get enough of them. Anyways, I'm going to hand it over to him. Enjoy the panel and make sure you get your raffles.
We'll start here in a few minutes, folks. I know everybody's still scrambling over there, so everybody relax. Congratulations, you've made it to the final panel of the day. Because we're saving the best for last here. Best because it's the last one, which means when I shut up, we're going to do the draw. So everybody relax for a second here, and we're going to talk about a little bit of the history of the government's inspection and evaluation of UFOs and how that process went down. And we're going to answer a few questions like, why do they say UAP now? What does it mean? We'll start here just a second. Let everybody come on in, get seated, get relaxed. I will warn you ahead of time. There is going to be a little reading on my part, so please don't doze off. But I feel it's important to keep the context because all of this historical document has come from the Department of Defense All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, known as ARROW. This past February 2024, which they just went through all of the history of all of these programs we're going to discuss. So we're going to be hearing it in their own words, and we're not kind to some of the older programs, which is kind of on point. So that's kind of a good thing. I think we're all together here. Are we ready, panel? Let's just quickly give our name and how the folks can reach you. Working down the list, you've probably seen most of these folks all day, but we'll give them one last plug for the day. Go ahead, Shaw.
I'm Shaw Wooten. You can find me at EPP_podcast at geeksparanormal.com. And yeah.
Jim Gray. You can do, let's see, Facebook for the Geneseo City Museum, or just look for the cowboy under the name Jim Gray, and that'll be me.
Scott Rademacher with Red Dirt Cryptid Investigations and also Bordertown Paranormal. And I do also run the Kansas Sightings on Facebook, so you can reach me on Facebook, Kansas Sightings.
Jake Frisbee with Road Trip Paranormal. It's really.
I'm Jason with Road Trip Paranormal.
I'm Jason as well with Rip. I'm Jason. You can find me on Facebook at The Ghost Dad. That's all I have nowadays, unless you can find some other stuff on me. Ken from St. Louis. Monster Paranormal is my group. You can look me up as my name on Facebook. Or you can see me on Tuesday night, 7 o'clock, a Muck Paranormal podcast. Woohoo!
Clint Cook, and I'm with Oklahoma Paranormal Information Syndicate out of Stillwater. And we do have a Facebook page, so check us out. It's awesome, I guess.
I'm Robert Prevo. You can find me on Facebook on Monstrous. It's a Facebook group, and I've got Monstrous, the podcast, which you can find on Spotify, YouTube, Rumble, all over the place.
Thank you very much, panel. All right, I think we're all ready to go. as I said, I'm just going to do a little light reading here. We'll kind of buzz through the first few of these. If anybody wants to comment at any time, just jump in. Just tell me to shut up for a second. So let's jump into it. As it turns out, the very first one was in December 30th, 1947. A loose conglomerate of people in the very brand new Air Force at that time got together and basically made a Project Saucer, as original as that is, to kind of get a hold on things, because we're starting to get a lot of strange stories from all over the place. So they did a collection to evaluate all information relating to UFO sightings, which could be construed as of a concern to national security. Let's see, the formal name before it becomes sign a little later on. One of the projects that Saucer, for its very short life that it had, that was one of the bigger sightings that kicked it all off, which Jim actually pointed out earlier, were the well-known accounts provided by private pilot Kenneth Arnold. As we recall, the pilot claimed that on June 23rd, 1947, just a few weeks before Roswell, I'm sure it's just a coincidence, while flying near Mount Rainier, Washington, he saw 9 large circular objects flying in a formation, objects that periodically flipped and were traveling at approximately 1,700 miles per hour. And Kenneth Arnold was a very proficient pilot. He was actually flying in this area as part of a search and recovery process for a pilot that was missing in the area. He was looking for his crashed plane. Had flown in that area a lot, and when he saw these things moving nearby, near Mount Rainier, he knew all those mountains around there. He knew how far apart they were, so he knew how long it would take to go from one mountain peak to another to the next, and that's how he calculated the 1,700 miles per hour. And as Jim pointed out earlier, they had a kind of a press call afterwards, after his sighting. Once the press heard about it, they just swamped him, so they did an official press briefing kind of thing. And much like you see today, the press is still the same. There's lots of random questions just pouring in. What did it look like? It's kind of like a saucer. It really wasn't, though. Jim showed that picture there. That's the one that goes around. That's not what it looked like at all. Kenneth Arnold actually described it as kind of being rounded in the front and flat on the back, sort of like a capital D, or more like the heel of a boot. But he wasn't used to being in front of all the press and all this center of attention and excitement. So he's like, it's kind of like a saucer. Well, how did they move? How fast were they? What he described, they wouldn't move in a straight line very quickly like an aircraft would. They were kind of hopping, kind of a thing. So since he had just said, well, it looks like a saucer, like, well, imagine a saucer skipping across a lake. And that was, of course, where the phrase flying saucer was born, because that's what was all over the headlines in the news the next day. So what did Project Saucer have to say about that and a few other early things? Project Saucer did not find evidence of extraterrestrial technology. And that's it. That's all they had to say about it. It's not from outer space. But then they roll into Project Sign, which ran from January 1948 to February of 49, a little over a year. They evaluated 243 reported UFO sightings. And in February 1949, it concluded that, quote, no definite and conclusive evidence is yet available that would prove or disprove the existence of these unidentified objects as real aircraft or unknown and unconventional configurations. That's kind of going into a little specific, that nearly all were caused by either misinterpretation of known objects, hysteria, hallucination or hoaxes. Also, they recommended continued military intelligence control over the investigation of all sightings for something that's not real and not a threat. And that's kind of weird. It did not rule out the possibility, though, of extraterrestrial phenomena. That's an odd thing to add in after saying, no, not real, it's not a thing, but maybe it's from outer space. Strange. Does that sound familiar? Does that ring true there, Jim? What do you think? It's the way they do. So that was off on a shaky start as far as the government concerns. But then they started getting a little heavier handed with it. The next project rolled in from February to December in 1949, Project Grudge. Normally when they give a project name, it's usually not something directly associated with, so they can't tie it directly to whatever the program is. Grudge was not one of those cases, because they certainly were very heavy-handed in some of their investigations here. See, they renamed the sign to Project Grudge. The staff, especially those who seem to lean towards belief in the interplanetary origin of UFOs, were reportedly purged from the organization. One account of this time period suggests that because of perceived pressure from the Pentagon's leadership, the remaining staff who held this view changed their minds very quickly. This same account claims that the Pentagon's goals for Project Grudge were to discount and explain away all reports of UFOs. Project Grudge was terminated in December 27, 1949, around the time a comprehensive report of its findings was established. The Air Force did not stop collecting and analyzing reports of UFOs. Rather, it folded that work into its existing intelligence processes. Now, the results from Project Grudge investigated 244 reports of UFO sightings. It did not discover any evidence that the UAP sightings represented foreign technology. Therefore, these findings did not pose a threat to the U.S. national security. It's easy as that. The report recommended that the organization be downsized and de-emphasized because it was believed Project Grudge's very existence fueled a, quote, war hysteria within the public. The Air Force subsequently implemented a public affairs campaign designed to persuade the public from UFOs, constituting nothing unusual or extraordinary. The stated goal of this effort was to alleviate public anxiety. You silly civilians are just getting all freaked out over those lights in the sky. It's not what you think it is. Trust us, we're from the government. Yeah.
Enzo, was this when, you may get to it yet, but was this part of the issue with the 1940, I think it was 49 Cape Girardeau crash? Was that involved?
It certainly falls in that window, and there are a lot of cases. I didn't break down a lot of the cases in here, but Cape Girardeau is one. It does fall under Grudge at that time.
But of course, nothing ever happened.
Of course, if you wouldn't mind for the audience, can you kind of recap that for them?
No, because I don't remember all the details. But I just know that it was in my backyard, about 100 miles south of me. And was it 1949? It was a UFO crash in Cape Girardeau area of Missouri. And my understanding is that some witnesses were there, I believe, and was it a preacher and a doctor, I think. And but when the government came in and they just took control and said, you guys never saw anything and get out. And then where is it at now? I don't know. Wherever that thing is,
wherever all the rest of it goes,
somewhere. I don't know where it's at. But is that kind of a
right? And that's the typical thing that we've seen so far in just a few of these, and that's of course a good example where people are they're making these reports like they're being asked to. They come and investigate them, and they're quickly poo-pooed away, or it's brushed under the rug, or these are not the saucers you're looking for. So We'll go ahead and press on with a few of these early ones just to kind of get through. Project Twinkle, summer 1949 to summer of 1950. Again, these are only like a year long, mostly because there was a lot of arguing behind the scenes of how to handle it. So somebody would do something certainly like something that's very high profile, like Toronto, and they kind of have to shove all that leadership out of, okay, we're gonna try it a different way now. And they end up handling it the exact same way. But Twinkle, established summer of 1949 to investigate a series of UFO reports witnessed by numerous observers in the Nevada and New Mexico area. These UFOs were described as green fireballs streaking across the sky, moving in odd ways. And in at least one account, the fireball navigated up next to an aircraft. The literature is not clear if Project Twinkle was officially supported by the original Project Grudge, but it was managed by the Air Force's Cambridge Research Laboratory. The goal of this investigation was to use multiple high-powered cameras near White Sands, New Mexico, with the hope that if at least 2 images of the fireballs were captured, then their speed, altitude, and time could be discerned. So if you have 2 different sources looking at the exact same thing, you can determine its altitude, you can determine the distance away from the original cameras, you can even determine the speeds if you can get multiple camera shots of it moving. That was their goal. The project was only able to secure 1 camera, which was frequently moved between locations following fireball reports, and no photographs of the fireballs were taken. So another failure. Well, Grudge, not to be overshadowed, came back in October of 1951 to March 1952, where they did a lot more grudgy things. The results of this new revamped Grudge, the new Project Grudge noticed that there were some correlation between sightings and the publication of UFO stories in the media. Captain Rubbold, who was in charge of Grudge 2.0, noted that there were concentrations of cases in the Los Alamos, Albuquerque area, Oak Ridge, White Sands, Strategic Air Command locations, ports, and industrial sites. So where the military was testing new aircraft, there were a lot of UFO sightings. I wonder why that would be. What do you think that means, Jim?
That's a familiar story, though. I mean, they come up with stuff like that all the time whenever they have UFO sightings. They're testing new craft. Wasn't that hovercraft? Gosh, I don't remember when that was. But you remember when they came out with the hovercraft? They said it was.
It happened to look exactly like a saucer, and
Yeah.
could barely do 5 miles an hour without dragging a wing. And,
Yeah.
that was a very sad. Oh, this must be what people are seeing. They're looking 3 feet off the ground at the military base. Yeah, sure. I guess that's exactly what it was. Yeah, a lot of really sad attempts. So this has been going on for quite some time. Project Bear in 1951 to late 1954. The results of that. The Project Bear report was based on statistical analysis of UFO sightings and contained graphs showing the frequency and distribution by time, location, shape, color. The report addressed that if more data were available on cases marked unknown, most of those cases could probably be explained away as common, normal things. It also concluded that it was highly improbable that any of these cases represented technology beyond their present-day scientific knowledge. Oh boy. There were also some CIA special study reports in the early 50s, which we won't get too deep into because it's a lot of Cold War hysteria that it's them Russians from the CIA. It's got to be them. But there was a lot of public outcry that, hey, you're not giving the people their due. You know, we're taxpayers. We demand to know what's happening. And they weren't really getting good excuses from the government. So in January 1953, they formed the Robertson Panel, where they had some other professionals and scientists on board. What were the results of that, you think? The panel reviewed all Air Force data and concluded that most reports had ordinary explanations. The panel unanimously concluded that there was no evidence of a direct threat to U.S. national security. And UFOs probably weren't real or from outer space. The panel was, however, concerned that with the outbreak of mass hysteria and how the Soviets could exploit it, the recommended government programs should use various channels to debunk UFO reports and suggested monitoring domestic UFO enthusiast organizations. Back in those days, all the Space Brothers and all of those old UFO groups, you could be guaranteed there was a mole in there that worked with the CIA or something like that, basically spying from the inside, and sometimes steering the conversations to go specific ways, especially if they were close to seeing an actual military secret. So, there was another similar report in February 1953, the Grant report. More of the same there, a lot of heavy CIA influence in that panel as well. And now things are getting really crazy because in the early 50s to the late 50s, there were a lot of UFO sightings. So that's Doc's time, that they were everywhere. You couldn't miss it. Anytime you looked up in the sky, there was something weird going on. So they had to get serious, the government. They had to come up with a much better plan than grudge just poo-pooing away everything. So they came up with a new program, which ran from March of 1952 to 1969, calling it Project Blue Book. Anybody ever heard of Project Blue Book? Does that sound familiar? Yeah. The background, the director of intelligence running that, that's a good start. Formed with a few other military folks based at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base near Dayton, Ohio. Project Blue Book was the longest running UFO investigation. It was led successively by Captain Edward Ruppert, who was the former director of the reorganized Project Grudge. So it's going to be fine. It really is. A few other folks, but what made this one different is they had a very intelligent, very smart civilian scientist on staff that would be able to go out and do these investigations. That would be one Dr. J. Allen Hynek. Anybody familiar with J. Allen Hynek on the panel? Does that sound familiar?
I believe he's the guy that came up with the 3 different kinds of, like you have the invasion or the close encounter of the first kind, the second kind, the third kind.
I don't know if he's the one that came up with that. Is that true?
I believe so. I believe so. From what I've done with the research, yeah. Now, he started out as a skeptic and then became a believer.
Yes. J. Allen Hynek's circuitous route through this entire thing, where total skeptic, he believed all the other stuff he'd heard. Hey, this is all explainable stuff and all that. But then he started running into things, going out into the field and actually talking to people and seeing the evidence that they had. There's something to this. Well, the government wasn't too happy with J. Allen Hynek. He said he needed to play ball. And towards the end of Project Blue Book, there were some pretty egregious stories that came out of there. I've narrowed it down to one. So you guys may be familiar with this. I have friends that live in Michigan, and they're still pissed off about this one. March of 1966, Dexter, Michigan. Are you familiar with it? You want to talk about where this one goes? Reports of fast-moving lights and actual saucers witnessed by citizens and the county sheriff and deputies over several days, including streaky photographs of fast-moving lights. Sheriff Douglas Harvey asked for help investigating these incidents for several federal agencies, but was repeatedly ignored. Desperate, he reached out to Weston Vivian, his congressional representative. He made enough calls to get Project Blue Book scientist J. Allen Hynek to investigate the area. After several days of investigation and interviews, on March 25th, 1966, Hynek gave a press conference where he said that the incidents at the Manor Farm, where they actually saw an actual saucer there, and the Hillsdale College area, which is where they saw the lights streaking all over the sky, were the result of rotting vegetation in lowland areas. The vegetation created gases that were trapped in the winter, and during the spring thaw, the gases were released. The so-called swamp gas phenomenon could cause lights and even sound. Hynek called it highly localized. During the press conference, Hynek said, quote, a dismal swamp is a most unlikely place for a visit from outer space. Furthermore, Hynek asserted that the strange photos taken by a police officer were nothing more than trails made as a result of a camera time exposure of the rising crescent moon and the planet Venus. Anybody heard the old swamp gas story? That's the origin of if you've ever heard that before in UFO circles of swamp gas. It's the reflection of Venus off that's where it started. That was something that was actually said by a scientist to a town full of people, which was met with outrage. The people of the town were furious. Let's see, the public wasn't buying it. Among the skeptics were Sheriff Harvey, who continued to support his patrol officers and the other witnesses. Quote, with all due respect to Dr. Hynek, I am not ready to accept this weak excuse of gas from Martians, he told reporters. So they're still trying to get more people involved now because they've made everybody mad. Congressman Vivian continued to put pressure on the Air Force for more investigative resources, and he wasn't alone. Representative Gerald Ford from Michigan also became involved, requesting a full congressional inquiry about the UFO reports. There was no congressional inquiry. But the Air Force caved under pressure. On April 6, 1966, they announced that they would convene a group of scientific observers to further delve into recent sightings, which led to a little thing called the Condon Report. There at the Condon Report. Hold on a second. Yeah, someone didn't do their homework. Basically, the Condon Report, April of 1968, took about 18 months, $325,000 from the Air Force to Dr. Edward Condon, a physicist, former director of the National Bureau of Standards. The panel took a narrow and somewhat unique view of UFO investigative efforts, primarily focusing on whether or not UFO phenomenon merited formal scientific research in terms of academic or government-sponsored research and in secondary schools. The panel said that they did not include the study of UFO phenomena as a potential risk to U.S. national security interests. Among other duties, it closely examined 59 specific studies. The panel's report stated, a general conclusion is that nothing has come from the study of UFOs in the past 21 years, and that has added to the scientific knowledge. Careful consideration of the record as it's available to us leads to conclude that further extensive study of UFOs probably cannot be justified in the expectation that science will be advanced. The panel cautioned against support for scientific papers on the topic and recommended that teachers should not give credit to students for reading UFO literature and materials. Sounds a little heavy-handed. What do you think? The panel also investigated and studied a small number of cases of alleged physical evidence of UFO visitations, from imprints on the ground and residue allegedly left behind from UFO landings, such as white powder and ethereal strands dubbed angel hair. You heard about angel hair? Anybody want to guess or want to give a quick explanation of angel hair? Nobody wants to touch angel hair? Well, you can't, because it turns out that the angel hair phenomenon was, there were some isolated UFO cases, but over the years, there's actually been sites that weren't associated to UFOs where over a very small area, a very small town, say, basically these thin strands of almost like cobwebs or almost like cotton candy strands would fall over a relatively small area of a town, coat the floor or coat the houses and the ground and the grass, the whole thing, to where it was almost like snow, but it would immediately start disintegrating, would almost melt into nothing. This particular case that they're talking about here, people in the town were getting like mason jars, trying to scoop some up so they could analyze it later, and would look at it inside of the jar, and it still would disintegrate to nothing, leaving no residue, no anything. They don't know what it is. But the Condon report is going to blow it off, so let's get to that. Where was I? It's not important. But the panel found ordinary explanations for each of these cases. Some of these cases originated in Brazil, Norway, and Washington, D.C. There were a bunch of other claims by other radio producers and stuff like that about crash debris and things like that, all of which was all poo-pooed away and explained and stuff. So now this made everybody mad, because now this is science people getting mad at the other side. It's science on science crime at this stage. So the National Academy of Sciences did an assessment of the Condon report in 1968. After the Condon report was criticized by some scientists, to include J. Allen Hynek. That was the other thing that we didn't really finish up. To be fair to J. Allen Hynek, he did come around after Blue Book was all shut down. He's like, they kind of made me say all this stuff. And he actually did like an apology tour. He went back to that town in Michigan. It's like, they made me say swamp gas. Swamp gas is dumb. But he came fully around to being, there, of course, there were a lot of rational explanations for many of those reports, and that's kind of common. Just people misidentifying things they're not used to seeing in a certain light or whatever. So that's to be expected. Not all of them.
Enzo, I wanted to, okay, so Heinrich came around after he got out of, he didn't go public till after he got out.
Oh, right, yeah, he was.
Now, you mentioned Edward Rupert, who came out of the Grudge.
Yes.
And then into the Project Blue Book. He actually came around while he was with Project Blue Book and wrote a book called Report on Flying Saucers, or Report on Identified Flying Objects. Yes. And in that, he leaves room for some of the sightings to be legitimate. They didn't like that.
They did not.
So they made him put out a second edition with a final chapter disavowing what he'd already written. The problem is, no one's for sure that he actually wrote that final chapter because he mysteriously died.
Yes, yes, he did. But I'm sure it was natural causes, right? Yeah, there's a lot of that. People that were involved in a lot of these projects mysteriously meeting untimely ends when they would decide to come forward. So there is a concerted effort throughout the 50s and 60s to keep it covered up, specifically hide it. Now remember, everything that I've been reading has been word for word out of another government document, the Aero office, the office that's currently in charge of investigating UFOs. These are their words saying all of this stuff. So they're basically letting the truth out, which is shocking. I don't know if that's going to be an indicator of how good they are, but
how much of the truth are they actually letting out?
It's certainly enough to where they're quite obviously saying that there were shenanigans going on back in the 50s and 60s for sure. But things go quiet as far as the government's concerned. It's a case closed. There's a different case closed we're going to get to here in a second. But the next official government thing we had was 1977. The Carter administration tasking the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. Dr. Frank Press, science advisor to President Jimmy Carter, sent a letter to Dr. Robert Frosch, the NASA administrator, on July 21st, 1977, suggesting that a panel be formed by NASA to see if there had been any new significant findings on UFOs since the Condon report. The results, 5 months later, NASA responded by saying it was not warranted to establish a research activity in this area or to convene a symposium on this subject. Is that what you would say to a sitting president of the United States? Well, apparently is, because that's as far as it went. Again, quiet for a little while longer, and we had the Roswell investigation inquiries in 1992 to 2001. The original one for that in 1992, according to press reports, President Clinton tasked former National Security Advisor Sandy Berger to determine if the government held aliens or alien technology. President Clinton said, quote, "As far as I know, an alien spacecraft did not crash in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. If the Air Force did recover alien bodies, they didn't tell me about it, and I want to know." Does that sound familiar to anybody? We're getting a little closer to modern day.
Yeah.
Maybe able to remember that. In 1993, Congressman Stephen H. Schiff, a totally different Schiff, it's not that other Schiff. This is a Republican from Mexico, made inquiries about the Roswell incident to the DoD. Roswell incident refers to a July 1940s. We know what Roswell is. We don't need to go into all of that. He asked the General Accounting Office to determine the requirements for reporting air accidents, such as a crash near Roswell, and to identify any government records concerning the Roswell crash. The Air Force conducted a systematic search of numerous archives and records centers to support a GAO audit of Roswell. As part of this review, the Air Force also interviewed numerous people who may have had knowledge of the events. Secretary of the Air Force Sheila Wendahl released them from any security obligations that may have restricted the sharing of information. It's actually kind of a big step. The Air Force then published the Roswell Report in 1995, which included, quote, the report of the U.S. Air Force research regarding the Roswell incident by Colonel Richard Weaver, and the synopsis of balloon research findings. Balloon research findings. What do you think the results were, Jim? Do you remember those? That story? Yeah. Basically, they said the entire Roswell event were people mistaking, back in 1947, weather balloons, just like the old story was, but they fleshed it out a little bit by saying it was part of the, I don't have it here in front of me, but they basically had projects where they were launching these weather balloons in secret because they had these giant reflectors that were acting like electronic ears, where they were listening for Soviet nuclear explosions, is what they were. So it was classified. We didn't want the Russians to know we were doing that. So that's why they cover it all up.
But you know, that's been shown that they didn't actually have that technology yet in 1947.
Oddly enough, you're exactly correct, sir. That they didn't have that technology back then, and it still wouldn't have accounted for a million other stories that came out of the Roswell thing. So, they also said the alleged alien bodies reported by some of the New Mexico desert that were found in the New Mexico desert were actually test dummies that were carried aloft by Army Air Force high altitude balloons for scientific research. Does that sound right? Not exactly. That project actually came along in like the early 50s. It didn't actually happen in 1947 either. Yeah. So multiple blatant lies in this Roswell report. Again, by a sitting active president, President Clinton saying, "Hey, I want to know what's going on. I'm the president. I deserve to know." And they gave him this total BS malarkey story. So what does he do? What can he do if that's what they're going to tell him? So there was a lot of back and forth with different things there, but a lot of people just blew it off. So again, it goes quiet, and that was like 2001 or so, until about 2009 to 2012. Getting a little closer to the modern day. Hopefully we're getting a little more activity here from the rest of everybody else. When they formed the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program, OSAP, which was also known as the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP. Two names. Why would I have two names? We'll get into that in a second. Anyone familiar with this? Because at the direction of Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, Democrat from Nevada, the Defense Appropriation Act of fiscal years 2008 and 2010 appropriated $22 million to assess long-term and over-the-horizon foreign advanced aerospace threats to the United States. In coordination with the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, they established OSAP in 2009, which was also known as ATIP later. The contract for the DIA managed program was awarded to a private sector organization known as the Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies Group, the National Institute for Discovery Science, NIDS.
Wasn't that around the same time that all the flying saucer videos were going around in Florida?
No, that comes a little bit later.
Okay.
What this is everybody's favorite bugaboo. This was the investigation into Skinwalker Range. So basically what they wanted to do is Harry Reid, living in Nevada, who's got Area 51 in his backyard, and I'm sure you heard some stories, some tales, gets approached by Bigelow, Bigelow Aerospace, and he's like, hey, I got this crazy ass farm in Utah that it's got crazy stuff in it, and including UFOs. If we could study it, if we can get a team of scientists together and study it, we might be able to figure out what these things are. Harry Reid said, here's $22 million. You go find them UFOs. Well, they set up camp there in Skinwalker Ranch, and that's exactly what they set out to do. They saw a lot more than just UFOs out there. It ends up being a wacky place like this and all that, where you've got paranormal type activity going on, like ghosts and specters and werewolves and dire wolves that are bulletproof, and basically werewolves that were wearing trench coats and smoking, and there were sightings of portals opening up with Bigfoot jumping out and running towards the tree line and all that stuff. Oh, and a couple of UFOs too. Well, they're scientists. They're filling out all these reports and sending it into the Pentagon. Saying, here's our report for this month. And they're looking at it going, this. I can't tell ghost stories to the freaking general running this project. They're going to freak out. So they kind of did a little shuffle at the Pentagon. They had OSAP, which was on the ground doing research in Skinwalker Ranch. So they created the ATIP organization, which was just the UFO parties. There wasn't any werewolves. There wasn't any anomalous creatures. There wasn't any poltergeist activity. There wasn't any of this other stuff. They hid that. They were keeping the Pentagon from seeing all this other stuff because, that's just crazy. Does that sound crazy to you guys?
A little crazy.
So that's why you have these two different names for it. Now, technically, officially, ATIP didn't exist as an actual program. That was something they used in-house at the Pentagon to kind of hide the wacky stuff, that was the non-UFO stuff. I mean, all of the things I rattled off to this crowd, to this panel, aren't really that wacky at all. And honestly, you do find all of these things happening in the same place at the same time. You've got Bridgewater Triangle, where you've got all of it happening. You've got areas in Northern California. You got here in Caney, where a lot of that stuff all happens kind of in the same general vicinity. This was all on a very small piece of property in Utah. That's kind of why I believe all of the stories coming out of Skinwalker Ranch, because if they were just trying to bilk money out of the government, $22 million, which, to be honest, to the federal government, $22 million is not even a rounding error. That's not that much money for the government to waste away on some program. If they were just making it up, they would have just sent in the UFO stuff. They wouldn't have sent in the dino beavers and stuff like that, all these other really wacky sightings that they were having. That's why I kind of believe there really is something weird going on there, because they were just asking for ridicule by sending in all this other stuff. What do you guys think? Does that sound about right?
There. I'm sorry. I don't trust the GOV as far as I could throw them, and I can't throw them too far.
That is a wise decision. Because that program, the OSAP program, ran till 2012. So that was like 3 to 4 years. Basically, the generals and the Pentagon, wait a minute. They had a werewolf that they shot at and it didn't die. Wait a minute. You're telling me there was a thing the size of a beaver with scales on its back, like a stegosaurus, and you let it get away? Just all of these other stories compounded on there kind of leaked out eventually. And they're like, what the F are they smoking out there in Utah?
Yeah.
What's going on? Shut that crap down. Get rid of this, guys. Now, because it was a civilian group that was doing it, Bigelow Aerospace, they're under no requirement to release all of the records that they have heard. So all we've got are these stories from people that worked out there or nearby, and that whole area is filled with lore going back centuries anyways. So I personally kind of believe there is something weird going on there, but the government wanted to depart. They were done with it. No, we're done. So they shut that down. Let's see, what happens next? Let's see. What do you think happens next? It ends up, there's a story in the New York Times, December 16th, 2017, story called Glowing Auras and Black Money, the Pentagon's mysterious UFO program, which they're talking about OSAP. That's where we get the release of the 2 videos. The FLIR video is what they originally called it, but that's the Tic Tac, and the gimbal video. About the same time, the Washington Post put out a very similar article, and they released the Go Fast video. So all of this stuff, now people are going crazy. Wait a minute. You got pictures of actual videos of UFOs? There's just something weird going on. People really grab hold of that with both hands. Now all the people are going to the government going, we need to figure this out. You guys remember seeing that stuff? What did you guys think when you saw it?
I figured we were going to get a bunch of stories and we were never going to figure anything out, just like we haven't figured out anything in the, 70, 80 years prior to that. So.
Right. You're a very sensible man. Because that's kind of the path we're on here with government disclosure. So what did they do? They hastily formed the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force, the UAPTF, August 2020 to November 2021. So barely over a year. They had a lot of false starts to the current era. But this UAPTF, that's where they came out where everything's a UAP. Not a UFO anymore, it's UAP. They actually had 2 very good reasons for doing that. One, unidentified aerial phenomenon, it doesn't have the stigma that from all these other previous organizations and articles that they were through all this stink that, oh, people are crazy. So to get away from that, because there were 2 very real things going on in the world at that time. There were very real threats around the world at our military installations. Basically, when the government says UAPs, they're talking about drones. Because they still don't know exactly who, China or Russia or Iran or a number of other countries are using drones to fly right up to our boats, in our military play areas, all that stuff. And it's kind of hard to shoot them down without, sending debris some miles away anywhere else. so they can get pictures, they can collect radio data, all of this stuff. And so getting that way? What are we doing? So basically what they're doing is they're making the drones look weird on purpose. So it's 3 a.m., you got a low-ranking guy out on the ship when it's docked in the harbor, and he sees this thing float in that's like a globe. It's got weird lights on it, and it's circling around the ship, but he doesn't say anything because he doesn't want people to think he's a wacky UFO guy. They're using our own stigma against us. Now, it's not that hard to take a regular drone and just kind of put a shell on it to make it look like a cube or a triangle or anything else, and send it out late at night where not as many people would actually see it. And even the ones that did, they're not going to say anything because they're going to think that they're great. So they collect valuable data, and we get a person that thinks they saw something from outer space and won't tell anybody because they're scared, because they think their bosses are going to fire them. So they needed to nip that right in the bud. Everything's UAP now. Get that UFO stuff. We need as much data as we can on whatever weird you're seeing around the base or out at sea or in a play area, all of that. Plus, they're still seeing super weird stuff in a regular fashion that's not a mocked up drone. You know, that's where your Tic Tac comes in. That's super weird. You know, it's nothing like anybody has. So there's still the genuine article like UFO is, you know, our group would probably say. And there's fake UFOs that is basically just spyware for China or Russia or whoever it is. So they needed to go through that process to name change it, which is why UAP came along. That make sense? You guys are great. You guys are awesome.
We do what we can.
So that's UAPTF. They had a rough start because they had a preliminary assessment of, well, we just started, it's only been a couple of months, and we've got some questionnaires that went out, and they're like, that's not good enough. You guys need to straighten this out. So they changed a few things around. It then transferred into the UAP Independent Study Group, UAPIST, June of 22 to September 23. They basically determined the original setting wasn't going to be good enough because they didn't have the clearances to look into any kind of classified material to investigate something. It could have been our stuff that was testing out somewhere, and they would never know. They probably should know if they're going to investigate. So, oh, never mind, it's one of ours. But they didn't even have the clearance. So they needed to restructure again, which brings us finally to the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, ARROW, established July 15th, 2022, and is still in place today. So what do you think? Are they going to do a really amazing, fantastic job, way better than those other jerks throughout the decades?
No, they will do the exact same thing.
What do you guys in the audience think? Do they deserve a fair shake? They actually wrote everything I've just read, where they certainly kind of socked it to some of those early programs. They were kicking people out if they thought they were from outer space.
Well, they sort of have to admit everything, sort of, because there's too many of these out there in the world anymore where people are videotaping and finding things.
That's true.
I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say, yes, I believe it.
Yes, you believe it? They're gonna pull it off? They're gonna save the universe? There's always a contrarian, isn't it?
Enzo, I think the only way that they will ever admit to anything is incrementally and as they have to cover up something else bigger.
I've always been of the opinion, yeah, I totally agree with you. And my thought process is they'll tell us everything only when they have to. There's a monstrous flying saucer that lands on the 50-yard line during the Super Bowl. Okay, we might have to tell people what's going on.
Yeah.
You know, if there's a 5-mile wide craft that's skimming through the upper atmosphere and the entire planet can see it, you're probably going to have some explaining to do. But at this point, it's been literally decades, since 1947 at least, that the government's been mixed up in this. It's such a hot potato. No, they're stuck. No matter what they do, no matter who the president is, no matter who's in the Congress at the time, it doesn't matter. They're all going to get that finger of blame. Why have you been keeping this from us for decades? So they're kind of stuck as far as the government goes. So they just keep covering it up. I don't know if that's the best plan or not, because nobody wants that to be. I mean, we're in election season right now, and you see some crazy stuff going on. They don't want to do anything that might endanger those polls. And this is kind of a big one. Oh, yeah. Oh, I know, yeah. You're currently in charge of a program that's been hiding the truth since 1947. That's not really a good look.
Back in the early days, a fellow by the name of Gray Barker wrote a book called They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers. And he goes all the way back. There was actually a sighting a couple of days before Kenneth Arnold's sighting on a place called Maury Island in Puget Sound. And these guys went public with that. And according to Barker, I don't know if it was maybe 49. Later on, as they're gaining traction with their information, they're visited by 4 men in black.
What?
And they are scared, and they never talk again. And that happens. Barker documents over and over researchers who were shut down by the men in black between 49 and 56. Well, probably 55.
Yeah, they were certainly not above doing heavy-handed stunts like that.
There was 2 Navy officers that went down mysteriously in a plane crash after visiting with the fellows from the Maury Island incident. It was one incident after another where people lost their lives.
That's true. That's true. So what do you think, panel? What's the best way forward here?
People like us to continue looking and searching and reporting what we find.
Good, good. What else?
I'll just say go look for Bigfoot and call it good.
Or you can go to Exploring the Paranormal Perspective and we'll have interviews with everybody.
As you told me the other night, hey, if you go looking for Bigfoot, you don't have to worry about it following you home. You don't have to worry about it.
Maybe.
I think all we can really do is continue to collect evidence as much as we possibly can until we have so much evidence that there's no denying it. There's, at some point we're going to get that linchpin evidence that you can't, it'll hit the public in just the right way at just the right speed and be undeniable. But that's going to be that 1 in a million shot too.
Right. Do you think that at any point the government, even if they had a good team of people, the good guys got in charge somehow, whoever that would be, do you think that the government would release to the public, holy crap-a-roni, that thing's from Alpha Centauri?
I think they would still try to cover it up.
I think it's going to be a mix of both. Like I said, they're going to spoon feed whatever they want to so that they can cover up something else, especially to cover themselves as far as, oh, we knew that all along. No, they're never going to admit that. It's all going to be, well, okay, here's that. Maybe that's real, but it could also be this. Kind of like they did with the Tic Tac and everything. Like, it's possibly a drone. Maybe it's not actually an alien. We don't know, So they're going to keep it. They're going to keep it where there's plausible deniability within the whole thing.
I totally agree with you. And you mentioned earlier about the spoon feeding, that slow trickle.
Yeah.
Do you think that's where we're at right now? That they're just giving us little nuggets, just to
Absolutely.
keep us dragging us along there.
Absolutely. Anything they can keep us distracted from, it's always, smoke and mirrors. It's if you're looking over here, they let Tic Tac out at an opportune time to where we got our attention from other things anyway. So
Well, look at the National, it's not is it the National Enquirer? Inquiring Minds Want to Know. Y'all remember the magazine way back in the
National
day?
Enquirer. I was more of a Weekly World News guy myself.
Well, you sit there and you look at that and you read some of it. Yeah, some of it seems phony, but then you get that one article that seems absolutely, like it could be real. Like, how much of that do you think they use to
You mean
cover
like
up?
the article with the lady going, I had Bigfoot's baby?
That boy is real, I'm telling you. He escaped. Here in the next couple of minutes, if anybody in the audience has a question, we're going to, do you have a microphone we can use for the audience? So if you have something you'd like to ask us or the panel, which can cover not just UFOs, because we've got a full range of the whole gamut of folks you've heard from today. I kind of would like to spend our last 20 minutes together talking amongst ourselves.
Yep.
But in general, to wrap up all of this, there have been a few instances of good guys that were quickly squashed over the decades of the government's, research into UFOs. The name of the game is to keep it hidden for as long as you can. Catastrophic disclosure is a term you may have heard recently, which is, and I didn't even touch on my favorite bugaboo, Lou Elizondo. I don't know if we need to go that far with it, but I'm not a fan. But it really does seem, at least to me, that's my opinion, that I doubt we'll ever hear anything out of the government. So there are some civilian organizations that are out there doing their own research, using monies from other non-government sources and stuff like that. So we might see some progress out of that over the years.
You know there's always going to be those too that are, I'm not going to believe it until I see it sort of things. And I mean, I've experienced three different, if I really go into depth of it. And that's amazing once you actually see what's going on, what's happening.
And I totally agree. There really is something about, because I've seen two myself over my life. I don't know if anybody else would want to share at least the number, or if you've seen something. Show of hands, if you want, who's seen something they may consider qualifying as a UFO. Got a few hands? That's great. Because there is certainly something weird about it. There's something strange. Is it, top secret stuff that we just don't know about up there testing it? Part of me wants to say, yeah, that's possible, but they wouldn't be testing it where so many people would see it all the time. It's not exactly a secret then, is it?
The question I have is that it's not just the United States where sightings are being seen and information is being withheld. We know that there are there's sightings over Russia. There's sightings right now over Ukraine. And sightings. So where are the reports from the Russian government? Where are reports from, say, the British government? And what are they saying? I'm not really aware of that part of it. Are you?
Honestly, in some of this, they do make reference to it, but it was all the CIA asking those questions. So, well, they're not telling their people because they're not real. Or maybe they're real because they're actually faking it over here in the US. They're everywhere. I'm not exaggerating. That's kind of why I skipped over, because there's so much Cold War paranoia just out of the CIA stuff. It's crazy. But anyways, I want to hear what you folks in the audience think. If you have a question, do they just walk up front here to where at the table here? If you'd like that, if you have a question, doesn't have to be about UFOs. It can be about cryptids. It can be about ghosts and hauntings. This is your chance to be heard. All of us would love to hear what you think.
Yeah.
There you go.
Go. The bravest lady in the room right there, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, I know this is just a TV show. You were talking about Skinwalker Ranch, but this last bit, they have the round cone-shaped. What is your opinion about this?
They do. That is the thing about that show. I mean, I enjoy watching hillbillies launch rockets as much as the next guy. I don't know how good of a science that is. However, they have caught some anomalous things there amongst their various detectors and their cameras and stuff like that. These anomalies that what they refer to as like a portal 30 feet above the triangle area, all that stuff. I don't know what to make of it. We don't have a Star Trek tricorder that can detect anomalies to pinpoint and tell us what it is. We need to invent that. We need to figure out how to even register that. And I don't even know how you could do it. It's very strange. The Skinwalker Ranch TV show, who's seen it? What do you think?
I think I'm very wary of any show that is looking for ratings to keep going on and on. They're going to be doing, there's probably some real science that's mixed in with, well, wait until next episode and see where we're at, that kind of thing. So take everything with a massive grain of salt.
I agree. It's an excellent question. I'm glad you said Skinwalker Ranch. If you said that other one, the Blind Frog Ranch show, I might have kicked you out of here. That's. Any other questions? Okay. Do we have anybody that wants to share a story right at the top of their head?
I'll share one from Oklahoma. Wow, that's so loud. But
Just you,
oh, sorry. I'm sorry. But the first two, I was real young and I was in Florida. But the last one, the most recent one, was back, I want to say in 2017, 2018. And I was coming in from a ballet in Tulsa. And I like ballets. But I was coming back, and you know how you see those lights that kind of tell you, hey, come here, we got a party, or hey, come here, we got a sale going on. I thought it was kind of that, but I didn't see the tail of it. It was just right in the middle of the clouds. And then the closer we kind of got to it, it shot straight up into the air. So there was no way it could have been one of those, but it was, and I don't remember what byway or whatever it was that we were on. I just know I was coming from the ballet and going towards 75. So it was very interesting. I saw it and I was trying to find that site that you can report your sightings on. And at the time I found it. I don't know what it is now, but at the time I found it, there was like 6 or 7 sightings of the same thing. So it was very, very interesting. And then I had a friend say that she saw something on 75 going towards Bartlesville from Tulsa that was out towards the fields that are there. So it was rather interesting.
Anyone else have an anomalous story they'd like to share? And since we're kind of at the end, it doesn't necessarily have to be a UFO, but just seeing something.
And I've told this before. I think I told it last year, and it's in the Kansas magazine. 1972, and my girlfriend, who later, just within a few weeks, became my wife. We were south of Geneseo when a white light, a beam of the whitest light you can imagine, came through the windshield. And I looked up through the windshield to see where it was coming from. I mean, it lit up the inside just like as bright as could. And then it began to recede, and I looked up to see where it was coming from. And this beam just retracted into the sky, and it was a dark night, no moon, and just really dark. It just disappeared into the darkness, so I couldn't see a ship. So I told that story last year, and I said, well, at least I didn't have any missing time, so I don't think I was abducted. Well, someone came up to me afterwards and said, well, you know, they can manipulate time and make you think that you haven't missed any time, but you might have. And so I spent the whole last year worrying about whether I was abducted or not. And I'm looking forward to coming back to talking to Christy and ask her about it. And Christy tells me, oh man, I'm relieved. Christy tells me they were scanning me, actually scanning my blood for something that comes from my father's line. They didn't find it, so they didn't take me. Well, then I got to feeling bad. You know, I felt really relieved. And then I got to feeling bad. Well, whatever was missing in my blood that I should have had, you know. But anyway, it all turned out. That was the sighting. It was spooky. Scared the daylights out.
Oh, I bet. Any other stories? What the hell?
About the only one that I have. I mean, I've seen a lot of strange lights in the sky and stuff like that, but I told you about this one. It was the middle of the summer, and I was driving out in the river bottoms. Now I'm over from Arkansas, and saw this thing. You know what a mirage looks like on the ground in the summertime, that real weird wavy. So imagine that in a huge orb or ball up in the air, about 40 foot in the air. And I saw it, and I'm like, that's weird. I wonder what that is. And honestly, that's about all of the thought I gave to it, because I was on the way somewhere. And I looked at it, I'm just like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do about it or anything. So here's this weird thing in the sky. And that's pretty much about the extent of my, there's a UAP.
Yeah, there's a lot of strange stuff up there in the sky. You just got to look. My own personal story, I'm from Derby, which is just outside of Wichita. In the spring of 1999, I was visiting a friend who lives right in the middle of town of Wichita itself. I went out, he went to the bathroom, I was going to go back in his backyard, and we're going to smoke cigars and just hang out and stare at the sky. I'm an amateur astronomer. Anytime I go outside at night, I'm looking up. And this particular night, I get out there just looking around, and I notice movement like directly overhead. And when I look straight up, I can sort of make out there's something moving off to the east, but there were no lights on it. There were no sound. It was, for the most part, jet black. It was like looking at something dark gray on a black background. You're not sure where the edges are. You're not sure you're even seeing it. But being the astronomy nerd, I'm looking at the path it's taking, and it starts blocking out stars. So whatever it was certainly something real. It was certainly solid. Now, 1999, I joined the Air Force in 1985. I worked aircraft maintenance. I've been all around the world. I've worked on a bunch of different kind of aircraft. I've seen different aircraft from different countries, and a lot at that point. I have no idea what that was. I can't describe what it was. It was, if I had to put a name on it, it kind of was like a black triangle. But it wasn't the normal black triangle you normally hear about. The normal black triangle has lights at the 3 points, and usually a larger, like a reddish light in the middle. This thing had no lights. I think the only reason I could even see it is it was low enough that the lights from Wichita itself were kind of lighting up the bottom of it as it went over. Total time of seeing it, maybe 10 seconds. Of course, it's near the horizon when my friend comes outside, like, look at that thing, how about that sky? Oh, I don't see nothing. It was way too far away. I could barely make it out, and I was looking straight at it, and I knew that there was something to it. So that's my story.
Scotty, I have a question for you. What about Bigfoot and UFOs? Sorry.
Yeah.
Bigfoot and UFOs, what do you think? You know the question.
Yeah, but I'm not sure I know the answer. It's interesting. I mean, there's been lots of reports like that.
Yeah.
Where they just disappear. Where'd they go? And I think there's even been some stories about reports of UFOs and then a Bigfoot sighting,
Yep.
or vice versa, a Bigfoot sighting and then a UFO sighting. So there's a possibility. I wouldn't rule it out.
There are a lot of people that are in the Bigfoot Sasquatch community that will be like angry that I even asked. So thank you for not being angry.
No, I'm here to help everybody.
Thank you. You're awesome.
All right, folks, we got about 8 more minutes till it's going to be drawing time. Last chance on some questions. You can ask another question if you'd like.
What would be the reason for the thunder sounding metallic when there's no rain and no storm? Just low, dark clouds, but metallic sounding.
Are you out in the woods when this is happening? It's kind of falls into something I think we were talking about the other night, actually, about like a loud metallic kind of clang. Some people have described it as like pushing a dumpster across concrete sound, a slamming of a car door, things like that. Is it something like that? More metal on metal. Any guesses on that one, pal?
And I've grown up in Kansas, so I know what the rolling thunder sounds like. It was specifically different.
Is that just one time that?
That's just that one time.
If I was gonna try and make it, I don't know, trying to base it in something scientific. No, I don't want to say normal, because maybe the thunder echoed off of something metallic. That is the only thing that I could possibly think of. Do I think that's what it is? No. No. But I mean, if I'm out there and I experience something like that, I'm going to be like, well, wait a minute. Could it have been this? That's right up there with swamp gas. I don't think it was swamp gas either. Yeah. Don't know. Great question. Horrible answer on my part. But anyway.
Any other questions for the panel? Last opportunity. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Do you have a favorite time where you like look back at yourself and laugh about it, about the time you got debunked?
Yep. Time got debunked. Yeah. This is actually happening right now with Jess. She's like, I thought you knew how to do one of these. She's going to take my award away.
Yeah, I actually do have one that's, it's kind of embarrassing, really. And if Brian hears about this, he's probably going to kill me. So we were at Jefferson Park, and he went there by himself to retrieve his cameras, and he's seen what he believed was like a little tree structure. So he didn't want to go check it out by himself. So I went down there with him, and we went and checked it out, and it was just an all-natural tree that just fell. So yeah, we were pretty embarrassed about it, and yeah. But this was one of those things, But it looked pretty good from a distance, to be honest with you. I mean, but once you got close to it, it's like, yeah.
Let's see that.
Well, of course.
I have a really good one. This came on early when we were investigating things. We were at an undisclosed location in Independence, Kansas, and we were in the basement, and we were taking pictures, and you go back later and you review your evidence, and I think it was Jess had a picture, and she's like, you guys, you've got to see this. So we're looking at it, and there's this chair. It's an armchair, and it looks like, what the Scream mask looks like? Exactly what it looks like, peeking around the corner of that. And we're all like, oh man, we really caught something. This is so awesome. So Mike, one of our teammates, he goes back to the place the next day and takes pictures of it for us. It was a pot for a plant. But it looked, it was a flower print, but man, it looked good. So good. So disappointed.
Yeah, absolutely made our blooper reel, by the way.
Yeah.
If you ever come to Bordertown Paranormal Presents at the library. We usually show up about once a year or so in our blooper reels and stuff. So come check it out. It's pretty freaky looking.
It is.
And it actually takes somebody putting their finger on it and kind of showing you the shape before that optical illusion goes away and you finally see it for what it is.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. All right. So thank you, Enzo, and everybody on the panel. Yay. So, and thank you to everybody for sticking around. Are you guys ready for raffles?
Yes.
All right. Well, stick around for raffles, and we're going to say a little thank you at the end and then let you go out into the night. All right. So here we go. We've actually drawn 5 tickets per thing just because oftentimes somebody's gone home. So I will go through these tickets until we hit a winner. All right. So the Bigfoot Enthusiast set. We have, let me see if I can read it. 807-2323. Anybody? All right. If you'll bring your ticket up to the lady right there or to me. It's 807-2323. All right. Next, the ghost hunting kit. We've got 807-2115. Oh, we've got a winner. Do you want to come up and get it? Oh, she's sending her with it. It's 807-2115. All right. Next up is the Bigfoot hunting kit. 807-2105. Yay! It should be 2105.